if you have your funnel built out and you know how to operate in an off-market environment, you can actually get some really, really good deals right now. Today is Wednesday. It is our Off-Market Operator radio show. And on the Collecting Keys podcast, we teach you how to make massive income, not just passive income with your real estate investing business. So basically, if you're one of those people that wants to buy like a house a year and just kind of be like half poor for your whole life, then go listen to something else because probably not for you. But if you want to make real money, you want to build a real estate business, then you should tune in. We do these 3 times a week. So go subscribe, share it with your friends, leave us a review. And I don't know, it helps us out. It might help some of your friends be less poor as well. But
Mike, did you see real quick? Yeah. Did you see that the BiggerPockets podcast is now copying the Collecting Keys format?
Is BiggerPockets copying us or is David Green copying us? I
just listened to the episode 1000 and they're doing 3 episodes a week. Some of it's like content, some of it, just sounded very familiar to what we kind of do.
So classic. The big dogs who are washed up and outdated are looking at the people that are actually making waves and just plagiarizing them. And so I will be expecting a acquisition letter from BiggerPockets and wanting to buy us out here in the next month or so.
It's honestly quite possible. Like out of like shows, we are one of the best. I mean, they're also coming from, what was the co-host? David Green and who? What was the other guy's name?
Mr. Rubrics something. I don't know. He had like some weird thing. He had a douchey haircut and he was kind of annoying. But yeah,
he was the Airbnb guy.
He was the Airbnb guy. That's what I remember.
So coming from them, we're like top level. We're top tier. We just have to clean it up a little bit so that we can do it while people have kids in the car.
Yeah. I mean,
that's not.
We've slowly gotten better, but
we have gotten better.
Yeah, but anyways, I'm Mike DeHaan here with my co-host Dylan Cook and Dan Austin, and we used to listen to BiggerPockets back in the day, just like everybody else. But honestly, one of the reasons we started this show was because we were sick of what BiggerPockets had become, and so I'm glad that after almost 3 years of us making that realization, they finally caught on and figured it out.
Scott Trench was like, maybe David Green does not do good for us.
But for real, and I'm going to say this on air and probably it'll get back to somebody that knows him. Why is he catfishing everybody with his new cover of his podcast? So David Green
he does not look that good in person anymore.
No, sorry, he announced his new podcast that he's doing on his Instagram. You can go look it up. And he posted the cover of it. And it's a picture of him from 2006. He's young.
Mike, here's the thing though. If you got progressively uglier over time, would you of all people post a new picture or an old picture?
Well, see, the thing is, I feel like I've had I like the 30s glow up a little bit for whatever minor extent I can do that. Right. I'm definitely not worse than I was when I met you in college, Dan, and I was 100 pounds heavier. Yeah. And I look like a little chubby 12-year-old.
So I'm going to
lean on what I have now.
Yeah, no, you're good, dude. You're all in, dude. Keep it up.
Yeah, I saw.
It's just the realtors have the business card from your picture from 30 years ago.
Yeah.
It's the same shit.
That is David Green's podcast cover photo for sure. I'm just come on.
Can I just say one little thing to that, Dylan? My neighbors are selling their house, and I just watched the agent who I know, and that they have a billboard in town, and they dye their hair and all that stuff. Their picture that's on the billboard is not them because this lady could barely go up the 2 steps. I was like, oh my goodness.
So it's like a different person completely.
It's like a 40-year it's like a 40-year difference. She's like an old lady now.
Oh my God. Yeah.
If I was the person that hired them and they showed up, I'd be like, who are you? No idea who you are.
That's funny.
Oh, that's funny.
Anyways, so we have some hot news today we're going to dive into though, which by the time this comes out, this is going to be probably old news because stuff goes so fast. But the economy has had a little bit of a meltdown, allegedly. I don't know.
It's kind of bouncing back today, I've heard.
This is why we're going to dive into this because that sort of justifies my views. But Dylan, you want to give us a quick too long didn't read about what this massive note that you sent us in Slack that I haven't.
Well, I'll do my best because some of it's it has a lot of numbers and figures in it. So I'll try to do my best to pull out the pertinent facts. But basically on Friday, which was the 2nd of August, the stock markets were down a lot. S&P down almost 2%, Dow 1.5%, NASDAQ 2.4%. And people were speculating that it was due to the jobs report that came out from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. And they basically came in unemployment went up, is the big grasp there, and there was less jobs created than was anticipated, and that was really the big miss. They thought that there was going to be 180,000 jobs created, and there's only 114,000, which is like a 37% off, like, lowering. And the fear is the trend, right? So now we have like this higher unemployment and lower than expected job growth, leaving like analysts to think, is the economy cooling down, and we might have like going into a recession is like the main theme there. And then we got into Monday, and Monday was even worse. They had bigger drops in every index. So 3% S&P, 2.6% in the Dow, 3.4% in the NASDAQ. And the VIX, which is the volatility index, hit 65. And for those listening, that's its third highest reading ever, only behind the financial crisis of 2008 and the COVID pandemic.
Okay.
Right. So like volatility is running wild, and people were trying to basically get into this complicated thing of the yen carry trade, which we can go into that if we want, but I'll stop there and basically say, like, what are your initial reactions to this and what should we be thinking about as real estate investors and off market operators?
So my initial reactions, I don't care. Like, I'm just blanket. And when it comes to these sort of things, if you're listening to this show, you're probably too poor to actually like focus on this stuff. Just like being honest, like
you calling people out here.
Seriously, I'm definitely too poor. I mean, even if you're worth like $50-60 million, right? You probably can pay your own bills. If your stuff goes down, that's fine. You're not going to get busted by this. What I tend to look at, because like when it comes to like the larger economic stuff, stock sell off, those sort of things, a lot of it's so emotionally driven by something. When you're talking about like the job creation stuff. I just Googled unemployment as of July 2024, according to Google Bureau of Labor Statistics, 4.3% unemployment rate, which by a little chart they have is pretty freaking good historically. I mean, going back through COVID and stuff, it was obviously higher, but it's been slowly trending up since 2022, but not like drastically, like 1%, like 0.5%. I mean, if you go back to 2015, it was higher. Right. So so
it's not the overall level. It's more like the trend and the year over year and month over month changes that they're kind of looking at. And I'll just pick
115 versus like 140,000 jobs. That's like, so again, if you have 400 million people in the United States, right? That's like 0.02%. No, less than that. 0.002% of the population. That's such a small sample number. That's like there's colleges that have more people than that.
So I guess I'll add some flavor to that because I disagree slightly in the insignificance of it. Although I agree with you, Mike, it shouldn't affect you, right? Like as a listener here, because there's a lot reading into that a lot of those are government jobs getting created. So the government is like basically creating jobs that will sustain the government, and then taxes. They collect taxes to keep paying the government, right? It's like great. I think there's like. I don't know, Dylan, do you know this? Like, is it like 20 something million government jobs exist in the US? It's something like that. It's like high. Like, I
don't know the absolute number, but I know if you look at that number compared to a decade ago versus now, they have grown exponentially.
Right. So there's a lot of that, but then you look at the unemployment is literally just active people looking for jobs. It doesn't include people that have not looked for a job in like 6 months, I think is like they stop. So I think there's a larger number, right, of people on the macro level that aren't working. Those are just actively looking for jobs.
You know what I would be fascinated to see? Because right now, in the small business space, we just hired 2 people today. We are actively hiring all the time. A lot of people that we know are constantly looking for employees. I would be fascinated to see how many job listings there are for American people versus overseas people, because this is something I've been preaching for years, that people are so worried about AI and all this other stuff. That doesn't matter. What everyone should be concerned about if you're a white collar worker is the rise of quality that we're getting overseas for people that will work for 1/10 of the price, that work 3 times harder, that don't take vacations, that never get sick, that have a fucking typhoon that wipes out their village and they still show up. We had a VA show up to one of our calls the other day. He was on Zoom. He pointed his camera down. His feet were underwater in his own house.
Could you imagine that in the
and
US?
he was working.
There's people that if there's a half inch of snow on the ground, just don't show up to work.
Yes. Right. And like people are saying like, oh man, I don't know. I'm not finding a job. It's because people don't want to hire Americans anymore, man.
I would add a little layer on top of that is that I think there's also a misalignment in qualifications for Americans to do work.
Totally.
Like, you know what I mean? There's a lot of jobs out there where people just aren't qualified.
Absolutely. I mean, that thing is, I would say the higher tier jobs, I would bet if you're a higher qualified person, it's probably very easy to find a job right now.
Sure, of course.
And then if you have a lower tier job, it's extremely hard to hire anybody because nobody wants those jobs.
Right.
And so that leads to kind of like this economic challenge that we have.
So to pivot back to the conversation Dylan kicked us off with, I would also add, like, when you look at these things, the headlines and all these sorts of like macroeconomic things, because they're real things, right? Like they're really happening, and they will have some long run effects and short term effects to everybody at some level. But like, what are you going to do because of it? So if we go into recession, because now like the red recession lights are flashing, and people love to see that, like just the news has something to talk about in the economic world. So if we go into recession, what will you do? Like, ask yourself, what will you do? And if that is just not do anything, like, what are you just going to stop learning, stop investing, stop working, stop earning, stop growing, stop? Then what? It's kind of pointless to listen to this, because if that's what it is, it's just a fear of you, and you're seeking that because that's what people always want to seek, is like why they shouldn't invest in real estate, right? Yeah. Well, this isn't the best time. I'm going to wait till rates come down. I'm going to do this. I'm going to wait till it's a fire sale. I'm going to buy all the houses. It's like, yeah, I'm sure we'd all love to do that, but that's just not realistic. So you have to stay active. You have to stay moving. Otherwise, you're not going to be growing.
So an anecdote on that is like, if I'm positioning for myself, you might not be buying the upper tier of your market anymore, because those are mostly affected by those interest rate changes the most. And here's a fun stat for you in the crowd. I just learned this actually from another investor who runs a local RIA. There was just as many FHA home sales in 2009 than there was in 2008.
Interesting.
Who buys FHA, or who uses FHA?
First time home buyers.
And who do flippers sell to? First time home buyers.
Mostly first time home buyers. Yeah. So if that is, you can be that in your local market. You're still like, people are going to move regardless of the economic outcome, just like any product.
Totally.
Make something that they will buy.
Yeah. And just, I like what you said there, Dylan, about, in your local market, right? Because my view on this sort of stuff, so for me personally, when there's like macro things that I look at, I don't care so much about like these large economic factors, things go up and down over like a short period. If I look over like quarters or years, maybe a little bit more, but I mostly look at like social sentiment and like how people are feeling about things, And so like Dylan and I are talking about the show is, if you go back to say, I don't know, there's a lot of countries that's happened, Germany's kind of the prime example, right? You can have an extreme social shift that can make it so it doesn't fucking matter what you're doing because everyone loses.
Yeah.
Right. And that has happened time and time again over history. It still continues to happen. We just had another big collapse in Venezuela. They went into a civil war. We've had this big thing as of 2 days ago in Burma, which was, kind of a third world country anyway. But now it's literally as bad, where the government has said peace out, and now they're just killing everybody in the streets. Yep. Like, that shit can happen in good countries too. You go to the UK, they currently have a bunch of social turmoil because there's a huge amount of people that are living under the poverty line. There was a social incident that happened. I'm not entirely sure, but I think from what I've read is that the basis was there was a killing of some children by an Islamic immigrant who was there illegally. Don't quote me on that. This is what I picked up off little pieces that I've read about it. And now people are protesting, and there's like these massive protests all around the UK. Those are the things that you should be watching if they are relevant to your local market. If you are in Spokane, Washington, where we are, and these things are happening in New York City, you're probably fine. Just like,
especially if it's a real estate information, it's so hyper local.
Especially if it's real estate. Yeah. And so that's kind of what I'm going to is on a macro level. I look at the social impacts to try and get an idea about how people are going to make emotional decisions, because they're the ones that I'm ultimately trying to sell to at the end of it. Okay.
Totally.
But then when I'm looking at my own day-to-day decisions, all I care about is what's going on locally, because in real estate, that's honestly what matters. Like, that's where I make my money, is here. And what happens on like a larger level doesn't really affect me that much. And if you're a local real estate company and you're not worth hundreds of millions of dollars, you're not like doing these huge acquisitions with these like 20, 30, 50, $100 million assets, you probably don't need to worry quite as much either.
Probably not.
Totally.
Yeah, so.
And like you'll see the headlines like price or real estate prices declined by 0.4% across the US, but who gives a shit if your local market's up 2%?
Exactly.
Totally.
And that's the aggregate of the 5 sample markets that they picked to run that survey.
That some person that is not educated nearly as much as you in real estate is going to come up with that, and they're just looking for whatever they want the data to tell, because that's what's going to get the most clicks today.
Totally. I mean, like they always do. The problem with like all the sort of studies they do is if you look at like how they actually gather in the information, a lot of it's just so nonsensical, right? Like I see this a lot right now since it's an election year. You'll see these things where they say like, oh, well, whatever poll just looked in, like Trump is winning in Oregon, right? And and then like being very close to Oregon, I'm like, I fucking can't believe that that's true, right? It's like they've been the bluest state forever. Yeah. And then you read about how they do it. It's like, oh, what they did is they cold call people only on landlines on
Eastern Oregon.
Yeah, in Eastern Oregon on Tuesdays between 12 and 2 p.m. Yeah. So who answers the phone? The old people at home. Of course, they're going to be Republicans. That's what they do. They're
people
old.
Not in Portland.
Right? Exactly.
No.
But it skews it, and it creates this false fucking narrative that's technically true based off the information they gathered, but the information they gathered is not inclusive of the whole situation.
Yeah.
Even going back to the BLS data that we started this conversation with, it's legit like a survey. And if like they don't even count people who are like might be driving for Uber or like freelancing or do stuff on Fiverr. They don't report they don't report any of that stuff either.
No.
So it's like garbage in, garbage out. Like how much can you actually take from this?
And that's the thing too, is like there's this huge rise of the hustle culture, right? And for all people that are looking for jobs, there's also a ton of people that have kind of figured shit out. Yeah. Right. I think it's Gary Vee that's very said this kind of famously. He's like, the Gen Z doesn't want to come work for you for $60,000 a year. They figured out how to make $6,000 a year at home on TikTok.
Yeah.
Like, why would they want to do that? We have somebody in our scale community whose daughter is making multi-6 figures on TikTok. Yeah. She got flown to Paris to go hang out with some makeup influencer because she's like a big deal. And she like, how old is she? Like 20
She's
damn?
Like,
he was telling us.
A little older than that, like 21 or 22.
Yeah. Like that's crazy. Yeah. And that happens everywhere. My wife doesn't have a job, but she is an artist, right? That has her market and stuff she sells. She sells her art. Now that she started to pick up speed with that, she's making almost as much as she was making at her previous job.
It's pretty legit.
Okay. But if you were to talk to her, she's unemployed.
Right. Loser.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so she doesn't show up in a statistic like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And how many of them are
she
there?
Is,
right? No one knows.
She is not productive in the workforce, as they would call it by the government, but she's out there hustling, making real money.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's funny though with the government jobs things, Dan, and this might show my political bias just a little bit, but there's a good schematic out there, and it's basically like government hires worker A, and all it is taking like a perfectly good road, beating the shit out of it, breaking it up, and hiring government worker B, and just replacing the same road. There's actually no need for that in the first place. But
there is definitely a lot of that.
So what is the productivity of these hires anyway? Like there's another equation to all that.
Absolutely, dude. And we all know government workers. That's one thing everybody can agree on is like nobody can trust the government. Nobody wants like a government worker to do a good job. It's like everybody's like DMV, go to the DMV and try to get your driver's license. It's a pain in the ass. Nobody likes it.
Yeah.
Although I will say Spokane's has improved a lot.
Has it?
Shout out to Spokane DMV.
Did you see my story the other day of I got a CMHA, which is like our Section 8 around here, of a failed inspection attempt from January of 2022. I got the letter on July 18th.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Perfect. I mean, like the epitome of that has been if anyone's ever had to do anything with IRS you like change something on like the platform, and then a year and a half later, you get a letter just confirming that they accepted your change. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, I fucking reported on my taxes this year, so I hope that you did.
They're notorious for like a 2-year lag as well. Like it's so bad. It's like, how do you operate this way? But it is. It's the government.
Yeah. Anyways, so I guess like from what you should focus on, obviously, is understanding, when you see all this stuff, you see like the scary headlines, or you see people on Facebook or whatever that are talking about like the big crash and, this is Biden's economy, this is Trump's economy, this is fucking whatever they think. Mm-hmm. You need to focus on what you can see yourself and what you can actually control. And what you can see and understand is typically going to be your own local market, especially for a real estate investor. And what you can control is your own skill set, your own allocation of resources, the own choices that you choose to make with your money, right? And if you focus on like building your skill set and learning to allocate your resources correctly, you will win regardless of the economy, right? You can go to like the worst economy in the world. Like, let's say it's not like war torn, but like somewhere where the money just doesn't go very far. There are rich people there that figured it out, right? Even if they're like rich in their village, they are relatively rich. Okay. And that's because they have the skill set and they learned how to like make connections, do all that. And so those are the things that you need to do. Like,
Keep hustling. Keep getting after
exactly.
it.
Don't like stop your business just because Japan is down 12%. Like, who does that affect in, your local market in the US? Nobody.
If we're looking at like the tail risk for us as real estate investors as a whole, okay, we do go into a recession or a depression. What happens then? Your tenants maybe lose their job and people buy houses less frequently for your flips, right? So what you can do, conservatively run your ARVs, have plenty of reserves, maybe wholesale a little bit more, take less market risk, but also you're going to have less competition during all of this.
Exactly.
So if you just have some sense of business responsibility, you should be able to kill it.
Yeah. And here's the thing is if you are bullish on the United States as a whole, just keep going because you will continue to grow over the long term. And I mean, the example that we have of this for Dan and I is COVID. Like, so we started our business together in late 2019. I remember when COVID happened, we'd started like, trying to work deals and all this stuff. And there was this little Zoom call that like the big player in town put together for all the other operators. And we were kind of talking about how we were approaching the market. And their basic sentiment was like, well, we're going to not do anything.
We're done.
And Dan and I were like, well, we're going to like lean into it harder. And we were able to take over the market as things came out. And ultimately it's because we're bullish on the US, right? And if you're not into the US, you think the US is going down, then leave. Like, go find somewhere to do business and invest your money.
I'm sure there's some other opportunity somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you'll figure it out.
Yeah. And if it gets so bad that like the entire US collapses or like every other country does too, who cares? We're all screwed anyway. So don't worry about it.
That's my whole theory is like, if it gets that bad, we're all screwed. Like, there's nothing you can do except for stockpile cigarettes, alcohol, and bullets. Like, those are only things worth value. Your stupid houses aren't going to matter. Your bank account's not going to matter.
The worst sentiment was probably, I mean, I was on high school here, but 2009, 2010, right? Like, think of all the people who bought anything during that time.
We're all
I think they're doing okay for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, right now, every time those people like go on a podcast or something else, everyone goes, well, the fucking guy was buying in 2010, so I don't even care what he has to say. Yeah. He was making the hard decision when everyone else was like, no, I'm out.
Yes. I will say this because I wasn't in high school in 2009. I was getting out of the military in like 2010. And I remember the sentiment for people was like, you're an idiot, dude. You're so screwed. You're going to get out of the military where you get a guaranteed paycheck. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to gamble, and I went to college, you know what I mean? And like, that's gamble in itself. But like between 2010 and 2018, there was literally no like, people were buying houses, but there was no like good sentiment of like, oh man, it's such a good market right now. It's doing so well. Like there's ups and downs that whole time. Like it was just like, it was super rocky, like really rocky. And I remember buying my first house in 2016, like my first rental property. And I was like, damn, dude, I don't know if this is a good idea. Like this might not work out. And I was like super scared. And like, I just did it. And then it worked out pretty okay.
Dan, that's a good point. And because I dive deep into this stuff from like an intellectual curiosity thing sometimes. So when I first started doing this, you could imagine how like much I was reading and stuff, but you'd see the headlines in 2017, 2018, like real estate headed for a market bubble, right? How wrong was that? So these are going to show up so many times over and over and over again.
Yeah. It's all about clicks, right? Media is, all about ad generation, and getting paid that way. And here's the other thing too, is if you are an off-market operator like we are, and you are doing direct-to-seller marketing to distressed people, you're kind of betting against the economic cycles anyway. Because here's the thing. If a lot of people are in financial distress, that kind of means that our inventory goes on sale, right? Like honestly, we have seen a huge increase in people that have like pre-foreclosures, people that are, have no money to their name to be able to, do basic renovations, things like that. We have several novations that we're doing right now that the people are walking away with like good money. And we literally, all we are doing is coming in and taking over their mortgage to carry the mortgage during the like transition period while they move into their new house. They don't have to pay 2 times, right? They don't want to have to pay like their existing mortgage and their new mortgage, right? And they're willing to pay us $20,000 to do that, right? And so those situations become more and more common
Yep.
as the economy gets a little bit weird. And so if you have your funnel built out and you know how to operate in an off-market environment, you can actually get some really, really good deals right now.
Totally, dude. And like in those economic situations where tenants don't pay, kind of like during COVID, landlords get scared. And there's a lot for the last 4 years, there's been a lot of new, really shitty landlords created. And the first thing they're going to do is if their tenants stop paying, is they're going to offload that thing, and they're going to offload it at a fire sale. And
Exactly.
those are the great opportunities where you can make some super good moves and continue to grow. And then 10 years later, you look back and like, damn, I'm glad I was operating while everybody else was crying recession.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that,
There's been, go ahead.
I was going to say, and the thing is with that is like, if there's a specific pain point that you can identify is going to be a recurring thing, lean into that and learn to, I would say, manage and monetize that. So for Dan and I during COVID, that was the tenant situation, being in a blue state in Washington where you couldn't evict anybody. And we made hand over fist money buying houses from these landlords that were well-to-do, knew how to deal with real estate, kind of knew the process, but they were like, I do not know when I'm going to get paid again. I have a tenant that's not paying.
Yep.
Dan and I would literally buy the house. We would go knock on the door and we'd say, so we're the new owners. If we give you $2,000, will you leave? And they go, fuck yeah. And they would leave and we would just sell the house. It was great. We made so much money doing that. Right. And we had several properties that we still own where we would go and we confront tenants and say, hey, you're not paying. And they'd be like, yeah, the landlord just never asked, but I'll pay you since you're the new guy.
Guys. Yeah, exactly.
And we just put them at market rent and they started paying them. They're still there 4 years later.
Isn't it amazing, those landlords that are like, how did you become a landlord in the first place when you can't have a conversation with the tenant?
Unreal.
Seriously, honestly. And you know how we like discovered that is an awesome way to make money is we just, because we're kind of stupid, we just started figuring problems out as we went. We're like, this looks like a solution we can solve. Like, let's figure it out. And we took some risks because like, you know, and we hear this in the scale community a lot is like people bringing up like buying houses with tenants in it. And like, now I'm like, yeah, like who cares? Like, what's the situation? And you know what questions to ask and you just go at it. But at the time we're like, gosh, dang, is this risky? Probably like, but like, this is how we're going to like solve this person's problem. And that's what we did. And like you said, hand over fist money came. It was a great opportunity.
Yeah.
We didn't orchestrate it though. We didn't plan it. We didn't strategize it. We were just in the trenches.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like any entrepreneur, you just took the opportunities that presented themselves and figured it out.
Exactly.
That's half of this business.
Yeah. And we were the only ones that were willing to do that. We did so many like random JV deals and stuff too, because they'd be like, hey, I need to find a buyer, but there's no tenant. We're like, well, if we get the tenant out, will you split the fee with us? And they're like, yeah, sure. So we would just go and we had our guy on the ground, this young 22-year-old kid. We just made him like go do our dirty work. Going knocking on doors, getting people out of these properties. You know, and it's not like we were like kicking the doors and doing anything weird. Like literally we would just have them sign a cash or keys agreement. We would show up as soon as they were out of the property. We would give them their money in a little envelope. And we would say, cool, see you later. Then we would immediately change all the locks, board up all the windows if it was in a shitty area. And it was fine. We did that over and over and over again.
There's a lot of like people who become accidental landlords, like in my area. And so they're like older now, they're on fixed income and they have like 2 or 3 rental properties, but they haven't kept up with them and they don't have the money for like the CapEx stuff. So if something like this does happen, they're the same candidate for some kind of sale like that. Yeah. They'd be like, get it off my books now.
Exactly. Yeah. And they need to, you know, collect anything that they can so that they're not carrying a liability and they're getting some cash back in their pocket.
Sure. Yep.
So cool.
Cool, guys.
Yeah. Is there anything else?
I didn't really have much else unless we got some other tangents you want to go on.
No, I mean, I think that's probably a pretty good all-inclusive wrap-up of that. So, by the time this comes out next week, I mean, this will be coming out. We're recording this on the 6th, and this will be coming out on the 14th. So, who knows? It could be completely different by then. Maybe it'll collapse. Maybe we'll be at all-time highs. That's how bullshit the whole thing is, honestly, because it could really go either way.
So today, the Japan stock market, it was down 12% on Monday. It was a limit up today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
See, and this is why this is the thing, dude. Like, this is why I think it's so dumb because the other thing is the rise of like the quants, you know, and like the day trading and like the people using bots to do all this stuff. It makes it artificial, like nonsense, honestly.
Totally. Yep. Yeah, it's all trash out there, and like you're like, well, who's really in control here? It's not the individual investor, right? So it's like if you can't.
This is why we pick real estate anyway.
Totally.
Right.
This is why I pick real estate, and we have control. Like
exactly
the 401k, you just plug money in it and hope it goes up over time. Which historically, yes, it does. That can probably still work, but like you have more control doing what we do.
Exactly. Yeah. You can force equity and all sorts of stuff. But I don't know. If you're a stock guy, I don't know, do your thing. But if you're really worried about the economy or like the stock market, honestly, real estate's probably not for you because you need to learn to think differently outside the norm a little bit. Cool. All right. Well, Dylan, that was a good topic. I appreciate that. We'll wrap it up there rather than rambling on for longer than necessary. So thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate you all. Seriously, you should go and share this with your friends. It helps out a lot. Also follow us on Instagram. I'm at Mike_invest. Dan is at InvestorManDan. Dylan is at, was it Dylan_deals? It's not.
Yeah, Mike is right.
Yeah. Don't listen to Dan. It's at Dylan_does_deals. And let us know what you think of the show. We appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you next week.
See y'all.